music, I think over time with just Western music and how I've seen like the African rhythms, I think there'll come a time where people within classical music will explore more African rhythms because sometimes if you look at some works by like Fred O, some of his notations, if you give it to like a Western pianist, and some of his piano works like African pianism, the notation is so different from what they're used to, how it's organized. So I think Western music has a lot to do, has a more to explore with an African rhythm. And I think that will come about through a platform like ours, where we're kind of showcasing these African works because it's a different style in terms of how you may interpret it.
It's lovely to get this opportunity to talk about your music foundation. And tell me, where are you based?
I'm based in Chicago, Illinois.
And your background in music?
I've been doing music since like middle school. I was in orchestra and jazz band. My parents didn't really want me to do music at first, but it was just something I found passionate. And thankfully, music kind of helped supported paying for school in undergrad because school is expensive.
Okay.
My undergrad is in music education and double bass performance, and my master's is in public administration. But right now, outside of the nonprofit, I'm a music teacher for K through 8 in Chicago public schools.
Oh, amazing. But so you have a background in jazz, you said?
Yeah,
Um,
I've been a jazz band since like middle school, and then at one point in undergrad, when I wasn't liking classical music as much, I actually switched my major to jazz first semester, and then I switched to music ed. So
Oh, okay. So, what I talk to when I talk to musicians, to jazz musicians, it's sort of jazz is such a wonderful genre, and it's also about bringing musicians together and collaborations and things. So, is that something that you also enjoy about that genre?
yeah, I think for jazz, the thing that I enjoyed about it, it was just chill. Like I
Mm.
remember sometimes when I was in orchestra, like like the stand partner I had at that time, I did not personally like, and it just felt like coming to rehearsals. It was just so like the air was thick. Like I like
Ah,
to have fun, laugh, and I felt oftentimes when because my freshman year and my sophomore and junior year, my roommates were jazz musicians, and I just felt like when I would walk into spaces where the jazz musicians existed, it just felt I just felt more welcoming, at least to
mm,
me. Just felt more community like.
mm. And tell me about this music foundation that you are a director of and that you founded.
Yeah, so it first started, it was always an idea, and I think it's like a shared idea. While I was the one who, perhaps started it, I think many people have the same idea, the same passion. So Àkójọpọ, it's a Yoruba word that translates to harmony. So I think the idea behind it was this coming together of different backgrounds and like kind of working together. But when it first started, it was just me, and it had a focus mostly on Nigerian musicians. But then as things kind of expanded and we grew our team, we kind of realized the issues that are kind of found in Nigeria are similar within Africa. So we kind of had this bigger idea. Instead of just trying to focus on Nigeria, let's try and kind of rebrand ourselves as Pan-African art music because we did a commissioning project in Nigeria where we actually worked with composers from all across the world. And we kind of realized that community aspect where everyone can kind of engage with us is just more exciting. But it's been a lot of work. I think when I first started, it was fun. And then there are moments where it's been hard. And I'm like, maybe I'm in for too much. But I think it's through the progress that we've made that's kind of kept me going. And yeah.
Well, a few years ago, I spoke to a Nigerian composer. It was in Nigeria, and I did an interview with him because he wrote an oratoria, and um, it was for me so fascinating how these musicians get together. You know, they don't get paid, they are not on a professional basis, they just absolutely do it for the love of it. And you think these communities and these choirs that's singing, so it's so beautiful that that's been done there.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think the art scene in Nigeria specifically, while it's small, it's very good. Like there are some very high caliber musicians, people who like interpret music and just the way they see music. I think is a bit different from how I've seen it, and I think
Mm.
it's also because of the language, because Yoruba's language is a very tonal language. So yeah.
But why Nigeria specifically?
Oh, I think I first started with Nigeria because I was actually born in Nigeria.
Oh,
So
really? Okay,
yeah,
so it's your roots.
yeah, my roots are, and Àkójọpọ is a Yoruba word. So, but again, our focus right now is kind of supporting like the African continent at large and also the diaspora. So,
Mm. So, and what if we talk about practically now? So, what exactly do you do then for the music scene there?
so in regards to our programs, one, we do concerts. So the one unique thing about us is anytime we've programmed a concert, we have only done concerts by Pan-African composers.
Oh,
So
okay.
like we have, and also we always wear native attire. That's one thing about like our brand. So we
Yeah.
just kind of promote that music wholeheartedly. Sometimes I've been to concerts where it'll be like, we'll play a symphony and then, in the beginning we'll play like this, no, it's the entire concert, beginning to end. So we really try and embody that in all the concerts we do. And also with publishing, this has been a very like long embarking. Our website launches next weekend. And while for some people it could be the first time hearing about this, it's been a 2 year process. It's been a 2 year process to get funding, to get yeses. And we were just kind of resilient. And the whole idea for the publishing platform is oftentimes with composers, due to like these payment gateway systems, like if you want to buy a piece from someone in Nigeria, if you don't have a Nigerian bank account or they don't have a US account, it's very hard. So that
Mm.
that accessibility for you and them is hard. So with our platform, and we want to keep growing the collection. But with the current pieces that we were able to afford to engrave, because Jesus, who knew engraving would be so expensive? But
Mm.
with the current pieces we have, you know, a musician like you now could go on the platform, see a potential work that you like. We have a couple of vocal works, purchase it, and the nice thing is 70% of the sales goes to the composer. Our platform is designed to really benefit the composers. There are other publishing platforms that maybe it's like for profit, but for me, I'm really tired of that narrative where a composer in Africa, maybe because they don't have opportunity, will just send their music out for free, maybe on WhatsApp,
Oh, yeah.
because they're just looking for a chance. Well,
Mm.
no, I want you to have money because that
Yeah.
when I did some research, most of the composers that we kind of looked up to, like Akinuba, Fela Shawande, oftentimes those people had full-time jobs. It wasn't maybe like in parts of Europe where you could be a full-time composer. So, Akin Uba, while he was a well-renowned composer, he also had to do some other stuff because at times, like with African composers, composition didn't pay the bills. And, barriers in that is because sometimes people just that value of paying for their works as opposed to just paying it for free. And I think we see now in the 21st century how we're trying to play more new music and old music you can just get on IMSLP. But the issue is realizing if you play music for 21st century, these people need to eat. These people need to be compensated. So, and we just want to make sure like Africans are included in that, and we are trying to create a system where they can be financially compensated for their works.
Well, I must get you Uchi in contact with you because he is such a great composer, and it might be that he can also benefit from your platform.
Yeah, again, that's the idea. It's definitely a grind, but I like to.
So it's all over Africa. You basically focusing on Africa.
Yeah, like right now, some compositions that we mostly have a collection right now of composers from West Africa, and then we have a couple from Brazil and Mexico, just because in regards to the African diaspora, there's a very deep connection between like Brazil and Africa. There's a pretty big Yoruba population. So, but our goal is to expand the collection to have more composers from like East Africa, South Africa, or like North Africa. So.
And what's so wonderful about these composers is some of them, like you say, haven't had the music education, yet it comes from within. It's something that they've developed through the years of playing instruments and how much of the traditional African music do you think it's important that we hear?
I think it's pretty important. Like I would say, we actually just had a meeting yesterday because like some of the instrumentation that we do is not traditional. So in terms of how things are organized or like the music, I remember we did a piece we commissioned last year, Atoto Arere. It had this talking drum part, and it was a bit hard because one of the composers asked, how do you notate for talking drum? And we were all trying to figure it out because we didn't really know. We wrote something down on paper, but essentially what happened was we found a talking drum master. He like looked at the music and it was like a reference point, but I kind of see it more as like, we had the classical musicians who were playing violin and the talking drum part on the score. I would say, think of it as like a jazz musician reading a chord. You have your chord progressions, but as long as you're doing something that sounds good, no one cares. So I feel like that talking drum part, I feel like if someone who maybe was not a talking drum master played it, I would just say like, they can read it, but it's more of a reference. And I think that African authenticity, and we have the recording as listening to like someone like Mr. Ajide play, because they may be like, this is not exactly what's on the score, but it's all right because the idea of trying to notate, the idea of notation is a more Western thing. So there's some things that is, I think within African percussion, it's a bit hard to notate. So.
But I've been speaking to quite a few African artists from Zambia, from Nigeria, and the thing is that it seems, and also in dance, I've been talking to dancers as well, that this African tradition, these dances, the music, everything is really the basis of what we now see as jazz music. It's the origins were there in Africa. So. And it seems to in the dance world as if some dancers now make sort of fusions between African dance and contemporary dance. So can you see that some things like that happen, that musicians start getting interested in in these African music and African instruments?
Yeah, I definitely think so. As a classical musician, I I don't know. Like if I just think about like the long-term future, like I grew up loving classical music. Like I've
Mm.
played Scheherazade, Dvorak, many symphonies, and oftentimes nowadays, me as a classical music lover, when I talk to some of um my friends who are African musicians, we kind of have this conversation where at times when you go to like sometimes symphony concerts and it's like new music concerts, for me as someone who studied classical music, I often don't find myself in the concert hall. And I keep asking myself, is it because like I don't get it? But then at times it's like the music, it just doesn't speak to me as maybe it did with like the romantic era music. And but the one thing that I find interesting about the music that we do, for the most case, most of it's very tonal. Atonal music for me usually is a miss. Sometimes it can be a hit, but typically it can be a miss. And for the average listener, like the popular listener who essentially they're the people who are funding, who are going to be the patrons potentially to go to these concerts, it doesn't resonate with them. You know, it doesn't matter how well known the composer is, how fantastic the new commission is. If it doesn't resonate with the popular listener, it's going to be so hard to get them to the hall. And for most of our music, it's very tonal. It's music that you could hum back, you could sing, like you could wake up the next morning and remember what you heard.
Mm.
Sometimes I go to new music concerts. I can't hum what I heard. I just
Oh
I
yeah.
don't. Yeah, so I
Mm.
think for us, like African music, I think over time with just Western music and how I've seen like the African rhythms, I think there'll come a time where people within classical music will explore more African rhythms. Because sometimes if you look at some works by like Fred O, some of his notations, if you give it to like a Western pianist, and some of his piano works, like African pianism, the notation is so different from what they're used to, how it's organized. So I think Western music has a lot to do, has a more to explore with an African rhythm. And I think that will come about through a platform like ours, where we're kind of showcasing these African works because it's a different style in terms of how you may interpret it.
Yeah, and I think also for young people in Africa, it's sort of something to strive to, that there is a platform. So if there are these young composers, they know there's some way somebody can um, do something or buy their work, or that it's something that they can work towards.
Yeah, actually, that's very true. During our commissioning project last year, when we had this call for submission, I've met many African composers who oftentimes are not like, the idea of composing an African art music. People sometimes think because this person's African, they can do it. But then in my experience, I remember when I talked to Johnson. He's a PhD student at University of Pittsburgh. The issue is this younger generation, because platforms like ours don't really exist, even though
Yeah.
they're African, like works of like their like I guess predecessors, they're not accessible. So when they are studying composition, the only works they can study from are Western works. So even though they're African, it's hard for them to sometimes capture that sound they want because they can't study. So ideally, if there are works by Africans they can also study, hopefully the future generation can kind of find more of like their sound. And
Yeah.
while still referencing these Western techniques, but just kind of see Africans and their compositions and kind of study it.
Absolutely. And I think this is also, I spoke to Muda Africa, the directors of Muda Africa. They're a dance company, and
Yeah.
they their dancers get trained into traditional dance as well as contemporary dance and ballet. And these choreographies that these young students come up with is just unbelievable. And it's something that comes from Africa, and it almost feels as if it's fresh and it's new and it's a bit forward thinking. So I can
Yeah.
think that in music it could be the same thing.
Yeah. No, definitely. Definitely. So
Now you are teaching in America.
yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
And just what the grades that you teach at the school?
Yeah. I teach K through 8 music on the far south side of Chicago.
Mm.
And it's it's interesting because like when I first started teaching, I graduated during COVID. So my student teaching was virtual. This is the first time I'm teaching entirely in person. In the
Mm.
past, you know, I would teach, I would be trying to teach, someone how to play guitar or violin over Zoom. So that's why I left to get my master's for 2 years. And because it was just too much. It was too much for me mentally as
Okay.
I wasn't experiencing the joy I kind of envisioned teaching guitar with kids having their cameras off. It's
Oh, okay. Yeah.
very hard. Yeah.
But how do you find the music scene in schools? Do you think there's enough done in schools with music?
Like it depends on the school. Our school doesn't have the most amount of funding, so I remember my high school that I went to, middle school, we had a decent amount, and so I think like when school has more resources, like if a school only has enough funding for like the bare minimum, math, science, or history, it's gonna be hard to engage with the arts. But I've seen that oftentimes it's more likely well-resourced neighborhoods have the capacity to like have options. Again, I think the reason why I did orchestra and where I am now is because I went to a school that gave me options. In middle school alone, we had a choir, band, and orchestra teacher. The school I'm at, I'm the first music teacher they've had in 7 years. So,
Really?
in terms
Mm.
of the amount of resources the kids can be offered, like, my school, we had like a beginning orchestra, an advanced orchestra. Like, there's just more you could do. But with the students I'm working with right now, it'll be a bit harder to engage with them in regards to like maybe performing these works because like the skills aren't there yet. But hopefully, if I can grow the music program, there can come a time where we have ensembles who kind of understand how to read music and can engage in this work.
Mm. And in comparison to Nigeria, for example, what do you see in schools there or under young people?
In my experience, like, and I just know I'm specifically where I was like Lagos. If you go there, oftentimes I've seen string musicians. Most people get their training, I would say, through like church.
Okay.
Most all the musicians that we've worked with, for the most part, were kind of involved with church, or they kind of taught themselves through online resources, or they knew someone, and then they auditioned to maybe study in a music school. But most times with schools, I feel like you tend to see more choir because in terms of like the
Oh,
resources,
yeah. Mm.
choir doesn't like, just sing. You don't need to buy
Yeah, yeah.
rosin. So, but I've seen at times, like specifically MFM, Mountain of Fire Ministries, um, the GO, the General Overseer, is a big supporter of music, and they have like a very good chorale. They have a very good string program. So, like that church has kind of fostered a lot of musicians who then venture off to other things.
And
Yeah.
it seems that though, because I've spoken to singers from South Africa as well, and many of the singers there start in choirs. Many of the opera singers that now are, in ensembles in Europe, they started out singing in choirs there.
Yeah.
Mm.
No, that's pretty true. Yeah, and I think also too because within like religion, like within Nigeria, re- like religion is a big deal. Like it's a so I think Nigeria is split between like like there are other kind of smaller religions in between, but for the most part, it's either majority Muslim or majority Christian.
Mm.
And for a lot of people, they're very, you know, I think sometimes in the U.S. people may not be as big on their faith or maybe have no faith, but in Nigeria, like that faith aspect, that going to church, is very big. So
And do you find because you are originally from Nigeria and you speak the language there?
I understand it, but
Okay.
I think it's interesting because my tone is not as good. I think
Oh,
it's
okay.
it's almost like, if you met someone who lived in another part of the world,
Mhm.
like they're going to have an accent. So I think for me, I just have an American accent because I didn't
Oh,
live
you
in,
don't speak. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I left when I was like 5. So
Mhm.
when I went to Nigeria for the first time in a while, people were like, "Why do you sound like that? Why do you say?" Because I would say like Daniel Kumapayi, but then the Nigerian would be Daniel Kumapayi. But
Ah, I see.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I just,
yeah.
the American accent is who I am. I've lived most of my life in
Mm.
America, so I'm not going to walk around and try and fake a Nigerian accent. I just
Yeah, I
don't.
know. But great that you go back to your roots, and that you start helping people there because I think that is really important.
Yeah. When I thought about it, like again, I said how while I had the idea, other people could do it. But the one thing I kind of observed, oftentimes musicians that would come to the US to like maybe study to improve their skills, sometimes I felt like they didn't have the capacity to also be doing this because for them, they're coming to a new country. They're like, sometimes because of their international status, it's hard to work. They just have enough problems already. But I think for me, since I was in the US, I was already a citizen. Um, I had more of a capacity. And sometimes too, with these funding opportunities, you have to be a citizen. There are many applications I've seen where if you're like international student, it's really hard to,
Oh yeah.
apply. And so I think I was privileged enough to be in a place where I felt like I could be of benefit to others.
Mm.
So yeah.
But that's wonderful, really. Congratulations, and I think it's a wonderful project.
No, yeah. I'm very excited about the future, but
Yeah,
you have to grind. The future won't just come to you. You have to go out every day and hunt for it.
exactly. Yeah. But tell
Yeah.
me, what are the wishes? Where do you see this project going, or what would you like to achieve with this project?
My long-term goal is for it to be bigger than me. Like while I've spent a lot of I've spent a lot of my time doing a
Mm.
culture, and I feel like it's almost like my child. And for me, long term, I want it to be like there's a saying called like ikigai, where it's like this idea of like this Japanese concept of like your purpose, and I really feel like this is like my purpose. Like for me, success is if it, I just want it to be successful. I want it to be the point where it has like staff and like when I look at maybe other larger nonprofits who have like maybe a bigger budget, a bigger impact, like I want that for us. Like for me, while my daily life is like I'll go teach. I like to run a lot. I'll go run and then I'll come back and do like a coach ball until like I don't know till the day is ends. But I don't do this to be paid. I do this because I want it to be in a place where other people can be paid. And it's just this kind of like organizational community that serves the purpose. If I need to be on like the board or whatever, I will be as involved as I need to be. But I just want it to be, that'll just let me know it's successful, where I could close my eyes, I could be in another country and know this thing is still running well.
Mm.
So I'm striving to cultivate that so that way, at one point, it's bigger than me. It's bigger than all of us. So that way, it's like this can really be led by other people, but we kind of have to like
Mm.
do the groundwork to create that.
Yeah, but how do you want people to get involved? What would be for you? How can people get in touch with you, or what do you need for people to do?
Yeah. So our website launches on September 15th.
Mm.
So I think like there are multiple ways to get involved depending on your background. Like there's one, we have a volunteer team. Most of our team, like this platform, has been mostly built on like volunteers. We did have a web developer who built the template, but we've done a lot of work on our ends. But there are multiple volunteer opportunities in regards to like assisting. We have in-person concerts in Chicago. There's also a lot of remote stuff because most of our team's remote. In regards to like marketing, if you have like experience with like publishing, sales, there's also development because we have to do a lot of like grant writing, research, donations. There's also like so you can be involved in regards to like in kind, where if you feel like you have the skills and the time, you can donate your skills and times because that's what a lot of us are doing. But then if you don't have that capacity, you can also just donate money because like for us, one of our goals next year is to increase our collection. So while maybe you didn't like donate your time, if you donate X amount of money, that will let us add more pieces. Because one of my goals is to have more educational pieces that can be accessible for younger kids. And so it kind of comes with two ends. You can either donate your time or you can donate money. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And then musicians, would you like collaborations? Would you invite collaborations and things like that?
Yeah. So for collaborations, like next year, we're trying to do most of our concerts have been done in Chicago. That's kind of like our home base right now because we realized it was a bit hard to establish that home base in Nigeria. And I think it's kind of due to the funding opportunities and applying to grants. So since we're based in Chicago, we would do most of our concerts in Chicago, but we are trying to do a concert in South Africa. So we did a collaboration in this year and next year we've already kind of been engaging with organizations here in Chicago to build that collaboration. But then if it's for publishing, there are opportunities that presents itself because let's say an ensemble wants to because on the website too there's an option to like reach out to us if you want to commission a work. Maybe a high school was looking for a work by African composer. If they reach out to us, we can identify a good composer, and it can be this collaboration where like maybe the end of year concert is a commissioning by and like we can kind of resolve like the transaction part because again we understand for people in the US it can be very hard if you don't have like a Nigerian account or like accounts in Africa. But then outside of that, there's also the directory because on our website we want people to know about each other, but also people who are like looking for potential collaborators. The one really cool thing about our artistic directory, we listed the artistic goal of everyone. So you can kind of see like some people on our directory, they said how one of their goals is to bring African pianism to the world or African dancing to all communities or music education for babies or recognizing female Africans. So like you can kind of read people's directory, but also see what are they passionate about to see how does things align. So yeah.
But that's wonderful because it's quite broad. So a lot of people can get involved in a lot of different ways.
Yeah. Again, Àkójọpọ means a sense of harmony. So while people may not come from the same background, it's almost like if someone can play an atonal chord, we can all come together. Because I don't know how they play 9 notes that don't sound good together and be like, don't that sound nice? So I'm like, if we can play atonal chords, we can all come together.
Amazing. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Daniel, but this was so great to talk to you, really. It's an amazing project. And I really hope that all your wishes come true and that also that the musicians in Nigeria and all over Africa get the recognition that they need.
No, I'm excited too. It's definitely a grind, but I also like to think like, the ending the ending of whatever this becomes won't be as satisfying without the journey. So
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I always think it's every drop counts, and before you know, the whole basin is filled. It's a drop by drop.
Yeah, no, I think so. But I'm gonna keep dropping.
Daniel, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your story.
Yeah, thank you so much for letting us share on your platform. So
it's a great pleasure.